The conflict between Hamilton and Jefferson leads to the formation of the first political parties, and it's largely over their economic visions for the country. Jefferson wanted to have an agrarian model where the common man was seen as very valuable or honorable, or the democratic principles would be protected by them. Hamilton saw the country as a potential economic engine based on manufacturing and trade, and cities. So their visions couldn't be more different, and it leads to this intense conflict between the two. And this brings up one of the points I like to mention. The founding fathers couldn't agree on how to interpret the Constitution. So let's just remember that the Constitution itself is a compromise document. And Hamilton, who was actually at the Constitutional Convention, and Madison, who was one of the main architects of the Constitution, they differed intensely on what the Constitution meant. So I think that's important to note. So the conflict starts over the bank. The National Bank was one of the conflicts. So dealing with the economy. Jefferson and Hamilton disagreed over whether or not to have a bank. Hamilton wanted a bank. Jefferson distrusted it. Jefferson argued that the bank is not explicitly mentioned as a power in the Constitution for the federal government. So we call that a strict interpretation of the Constitution, or a strict construction of the Constitution. In other words, if the Constitution does not allow that activity explicitly, it is not allowed to be done. Hamilton, on the other hand, argues that states didn't have it in their power to create banks either, but of the three existing banks, they were all chartered by the states. He argues that according to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress can make any law that it deems necessary and proper. This is sometimes called the elastic clause. It allows the government's power to stretch. He is what we call a loose interpreter of the Constitution. In other words, as long as the Constitution does not prohibit the action, the government can do it. So we have these radically different views of how to interpret the Constitution in the first generation within the first presidency administration of the United States. Long story short, Washington agrees with Hamilton. The bank is chartered. But this really makes many people upset and fearful, especially the agrarian population. 90% of the country is still living in rural areas. Most of them are tied into the agricultural sector. So Jefferson and Madison really feel like the manufacturing and the banks and the loans and the debts, all of that is going to lead to the corruption of the United States and the taking away of American liberties. So they form a party, which we eventually call the Democratic Republicans. Sometimes it's called the Jeffersonian Democrats or the Jeffersonian Republicans. It all means the same thing. They form a political party that tries to strictly interpret the Constitution and create that agrarian economy, keeping the government very small. Hamilton, for his part, he's going to form a political party, a loose collection, which is called the Federalists. Now, this is unrelated to the ratification Federalists, so please don't get confused by that. But Hamilton's Federalists want a strong central government that's going to increase the power of the central government in order to protect those gains that were made during the American Revolution.